Mr. Richard Bennett, thank you so much for this opportunity. In your second report on the situation of human rights in Afghanistan, you said that the human rights crisis in Afghanistan has worsened since your first report. Can you elaborate on that? Why you think so?
Well, first of all, Sami, thank you very much for having me on AMU TV. I appreciate this opportunity. And since we're on this program, let me start by noting the worsening of the situation for the media. When I made my first report, I was already concerned about the shrinking of space for freedom of expression and some censorship of the media. But now, 6 months later, the situation has deteriorated further. And perhaps this interview with AMU TV is an example where journalists who were previously professionals working inside Afghanistan, like yourself, are now forced to undertake your profession abroad because both of the restrictions on the media and the censorship, and also reports about threats and worse. So that is one area, and allied to that, I would say that the space for civil society generally to undertake its important activities in Afghanistan, like in any society, and including particularly human rights defenders and women human rights defenders among them, have also experienced more pressure. And we have noted the arrests, for example, and threats against women human rights defenders and others, for example, activists who have been promoting and advocating for education of women. So these are two areas which I would say have continued to deteriorate.
It has been more than a year, just more than a year since you were appointed as the Special Rapporteur on human rights situation in Afghanistan. And we see all the time that the UN says that we have noted the crisis or worsening the situation of human rights in Afghanistan. But how United Nations could help to improve the situation in Afghanistan, and how long people should wait?
Well, my role is to report on the situation. I'm appointed by the Human Rights Council to make an assessment, to report, and to make recommendations for improvements. I don't have that power myself.
Yes,
it's over to the member states.
I have your entire second report here. So when you submit your report to the member states and the United Nations Human Rights Council, what happens next?
What happens is we have a discussion about the report, and then it is over to the member states to use that report in the ways that they see fit. And I would ask them to do more to support the people of Afghanistan, in particular those who are working on education, especially girls' education, and to support civil society. But also they need to push back more on the Taliban.
And they do?
I think they still need to do more to make, not just with words, but with actions.
You have submitted two reports,
Yeah.
two detailed reports. And as you say, and you have witnessed it yourself in Afghanistan, that the situation is just worsening in Afghanistan. So what are the member states doing about it? Any proper action?
I think that when it comes to bringing about change on with the Taliban, it's difficult to see much impact. When it comes to bringing about change within member states, there is, I think, some different positions being taken. For example, some countries have decided that Afghan women who have reached those countries will be given asylum because all Afghan women are persecuted. They're considered to have been persecuted now in Afghanistan. We've seen a little bit more in terms of sanctions by the EU, for example, but still I think there needs to be further measures taken to show that there are consequences for human rights violations.
When you say all women, you're talking about 20 million people,
yes.
right? So it should be impossible to give all of them asylum abroad. So the question is what the international community, the member states, are doing about women's situation in Afghanistan to improve the situation.
I think there's a need to continue, for member states to continue their advocacy to insist on Afghanistan's international human rights obligations. For example, it's signed up to most of the international treaties, including the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. And I believe that they need to be made accountable under those conventions. There are some ways to do that, including through litigation. You've also raised the issue, and I've mentioned it, of persecution of women. Gender persecution, and I agree, it's not possible for asylum to be given to all Afghan women. What's needed is for the Taliban to change their policies and for there to be consequences if they don't. Gender persecution is a crime under their own statute.
They haven't. They have been ruling the country for more than a year and a half, and it's very clear that they are not going to change, at least for now, their policies towards women in Afghanistan and the civil space, as you said. So, what kind of actions you and the people in Afghanistan could expect from the international community further?
It's not for me, I don't have the authority, but there are authorities that could hold the Taliban accountable for their actions against women under international law. As I've mentioned, gender persecution, for example, is regarded as an international crime, a crime against humanity. Individuals could be held to account. And I think that ought to be looked at and implemented by the responsible elements of the international community.
You have been to Afghanistan a number of times since you took the responsibility. I wanted to ask about a phrase in your part of your recent report. You said that durable peace requires inclusive administration from all political and religious and ethnic groups, and the de facto cabinet consists of Pashtuns. You have also mentioned that shift in decision making from Kabul to Kandahar is more visible, right? Why is that happening, and why is that important to watch?
Well, I think one thing I've said is that the situation of women is the most serious of any country. But in fact, the human rights situation overall is very, very serious in Afghanistan. And for durable peace, there need to be respect for human rights and inclusive policies. I didn't say, in fact, that the entire cabinet of the Taliban are Pashtuns. We know that there are some from other ethnic groups, but nevertheless it is still not sufficiently inclusive to represent the nature of the society as a whole. There should be no one left behind. There should be no discrimination. And for durable peace in Afghanistan as well as in other countries, it's shown that there needs to be an inclusive administration.
Yeah, and also you said that we witness a shift in decision making from Kabul to Kandahar. It means more authority to Haibatullah Akhundzada, right? And are you worried about that this man is claiming more authority in the Taliban regime?
Well, we've certainly noted that, and we've noted that the decrees that Haibatullah Akhundzada has issued increasingly rigorous, they're increasingly conservative, and of course this person is extremely powerful, is considered to be infallible by some in the Taliban, so it's extremely difficult to question him. This is not like a democracy. This is an autocracy with the decisions being made and handed down by one person. And that is dangerous.
I think you haven't met him, right? Have you?
I don't know any international people who've met him. I haven't met him. No.
Mrs. Amina Muhammad tried to meet him, right?
I think a number of international visitors to Afghanistan have tried to meet him. I don't know of anyone who's been successful.
Yeah. Do you think it's only Hibatullah Akhundzada who has these extreme ideas about women's rights and human rights in general, or you think that there is a group of Taliban or Taliban in entirety are like that?
I expect that there is a shura in Kandahar which is extremely conservative, and at the moment also holds a lot of the power. I'm often presented with two scenarios. One of them is that there are some Taliban, the group we just mentioned, who are extremely conservative, and there's a more group of, shall we say, pragmatists. And another perspective is that that's not really the case, that the Taliban are in fact all implementing the same policy, and they may be playing more like a bad cop and good cop approach.
So you think they are all the same, they think the same, they have the same ideology, but some of them are playing the good cop and others are playing the bad
I don't
cop.
know, I just said that those are two perspectives that are presented.
But what is your observation?
My observation is that I am able to exchange information and exchange views with some of those in the cabinet in Kabul, and I can have a dialogue with them where I'm able to express my views about their human rights responsibilities, and they respond. That's all I can say. I have been to Kandahar. I met the provincial governor and others, but I have not met Mr. Hibatullah.
You were lucky you met the provincial governor. Mrs. Amina Muhammad met only the deputy provincial governor, right?
I believe so, but I think since that I met, that was back in May last year, and maybe the policies have changed since then.
Yeah, so the Taliban a few days ago, a week ago, announced that the UN female workers cannot work in Afghanistan. So how that behavior changed the United Nations behavior and attitude towards the Taliban, policies towards the Taliban?
Well, I'm not responsible for the UN's attitudes and policies. That's the responsibility of the UN Secretary General and his representative in Afghanistan and others. I think it's too soon to say. I would point out, as we all know, that the staff of NGOs, the female staff of NGOs, were prevented from coming to the office for several months now, so this is moving that also into the UN. I would look at this from, in a way, the other perspective, which is what is the impact on Afghans of this? I'm asked to take a gender-based and survivor-centered approach. So I would like to tend to look at this from the impact on Afghans and what Afghans want. Now, I understand that the UN, for the time being, is keeping its staff at home while they're assessing the situation.
For how long?
I believe they announced till May 5th, but this is, again, is only what I've been told, is not my decision.
So they started from banning girls above grade 6 going to school, then they banned girls from universities, then from working for NGOs, and now for the United Nations. Does it mean that your advocacies, the UN's advocacies for women's rights in Afghanistan, Taliban just don't listen to you?
I think that what I would take from it is that they are repeating what they did between 96 and 2001. Because looking back, the different edicts that were announced more than 20 years ago seem to be repeated now. So it suggests that their policies have not changed very much. I'm not saying they're a mirror image, but they are quite similar to the time back then. And again, it is a difficult challenge for the international community, and I think what the international community needs to do is to not be constantly reacting, but to get on the front foot and to do some practical things. I don't have the authority, but
practical
others
things
do.
like what?
Practical things like deciding how they will approach this, whether they are going to impose more sanctions, for example,
on the Taliban.
On the Taliban, yeah.
Okay, we hear from the Taliban ministers and their leadership that they are expecting the international community to recognize their regime. So, what do you think? Is the international atmosphere ready for that, given the kind of actions the Taliban taking?
I mean, that's over to the members of the international community, the member states, and to the others such as the Credentials Committee of the General Assembly. But I also think that recognition can be formal, but also informal in terms of normalizing what is unacceptable. And my view is that it is, and having spoken to many Afghans, especially Afghan women, is that they call on the international community not to normalize what is unacceptable in terms of equality of women and men and other human rights. And to go back to the first point you mentioned about school education being banned for girls above grade 6 and also later university, this will have a very disastrous long-term impact on a whole generation of Afghan women if it continues, women and girls.
So you're suggesting that the international community not only shouldn't recognize, but also shouldn't normalize the Taliban and relationship with the Taliban, right?
Yes, I believe so. I think that needs to be considered very carefully because normalization is a little bit of a blurry concept and can happen gradually over time. And I think that it needs to be monitored very carefully by members of the international community.
Do you see signs of normalization from the international community?
Possibly, but when we say international community, it's not homogenous. It's not all
Western powers, United States, Western European countries, are they normalizing the Taliban?
I think what's important is that there is one voice from the international community, and I'm not seeing one voice right now. Different voices from different powers and from different regions at the moment.
And my last question about the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. How serious do you think that crisis is? And we see people, or some people are balancing between or one against another, the human rights crisis versus the humanitarian crisis. What do you say about that?
I think it's both. It's and there is a nexus between a human rights crisis and a humanitarian crisis. What I would like to see more is human rights principles and language used to describe the crisis in Afghanistan. Humanitarian issues are by and large issues of economic, social and cultural rights, the right to food, the right to water, the right to a roof over your head. These issues are human rights and we should frame them in that sense. So I don't think it's either or, but I do understand, I think, what you're getting at. One group may be saying we should always stay and deliver unconditionally, and another group is arguing that that unconditional provision of aid may, in fact, support and assist those that are causing the problems in the first place. But I would also say that while the humanitarian crisis it has many factors. Some of it is natural, some of it is responsibility of the current authorities, but the humanitarian crisis has deeper roots that goes back before, and as I've said in my reports and when I've been speaking previously, human rights violations did not start in August 2021. They have deteriorated since then, but there needs to be a reflection further back in history as well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Richard Bennett.
Thank you very much,
you.
Sami.
Thank you.